Ambassador Helena Vance walked into the Grand Assembly Hall of the Galactic Council. Her footsteps echoed against the ancient stone floor. Above her, 17,000 alien delegates sat in rising circles that reached toward a ceiling so high, it disappeared into darkness. 400 species watched her approach the speaking platform. Some had scales, some had feathers, some had bodies made of light. All of them looked down at the small human woman with expressions ranging from boredom to mild curiosity. Helena had walked this path many times before. For 12 years, she had served as Earth's voice in this chamber. She had begged for resources. She had argued for fair treatment. She had presented case after case showing how humanity deserved better. And for 12 years, the Council had smiled politely and done nothing. Today would be different. The Galactic Council had existed for over 50,000 years. Its members had built empires that spanned entire galaxies. They had solved mysteries of the universe that humanity was only beginning to understand. When Earth first made contact with alien life 80 years ago, humans had felt like children discovering a world of giants. They had been eager to learn, eager to help, eager to prove themselves worthy of standing among the stars. The Council had welcomed them with open arms and hidden chains. Humanity was given probationary status. This sounded hopeful at first. It suggested that if humans worked hard enough, they would eventually be accepted as equals. But 80 years had passed, and that acceptance never came. Instead, humans were assigned the jobs no other species wanted. They mined asteroids in the most dangerous regions of space. They tested new technologies that might explode or cause strange diseases. They served as soldiers in conflicts that had nothing to do with Earth. They cleaned and maintained and served while the older species enjoyed the benefits of civilization. In return, humanity received outdated technology and endless promises that things would improve. Helena reached the speaking platform and turned to face the assembly. The Zyrathi delegation sat directly in front of her. They were tall beings with gray skin and 4 arms. Their high speaker, a creature named Zalkorath, had ruled his people for 3 centuries. He looked at Helena the way a person might look at an insect that had wandered into their home. To the left sat the Caverith. They resembled giant mantises with shells of deep blue. Their clicking and chittering filled the chamber like strange music. They were considered one of the most intelligent species in the galaxy, and they never let anyone forget it. High above, in positions of honor, the Orilani elders floated in chambers of pure light. They were the oldest species in the Council, beings who had been ancient when most other civilizations were still learning to use fire. They rarely spoke. They rarely moved. They simply observed, and their silence carried more weight than any words. Helena activated her translation device and began to speak. "Honored delegates of the Galactic Council," she said. Her voice was calm and steady. "I come before you today with a message from Earth." Zalkorath waved one of his 4 hands dismissively. "We have heard many messages from Earth, Ambassador. Requests for technology, complaints about assignments, appeals for advancement. The Council has more important matters to discuss." Helena smiled. It was a small smile, but something about it made several nearby delegates shift uncomfortably in their seats. "This message is different, High Speaker. This message is very short." She paused and looked around the chamber. 17,000 pairs of eyes, some with 1 eye, some with dozens, watched her. "Humanity withdraws from the Galactic Council. Effective immediately. All treaties, agreements, and obligations between Earth and this body are hereby terminated." For a moment, the chamber was completely silent. Then Zalkorath laughed. It was a harsh sound, like stones grinding together. "A tantrum," he said. "The young species throws a tantrum because it did not get what it wanted." The Kreth delegation began clicking in what Helena knew was their version of laughter. Other species joined in. The sound of alien amusement filled the Grand Assembly Hall. Helena waited. She did not argue. She did not explain. She simply stood there with that small smile on her face. When the laughter died down, she spoke again. "Humanity came to the stars seeking partners. We found only masters who mistook our patience for weakness. We asked to stand beside you. You told us to kneel before you. We offered friendship. You demanded servitude." She looked directly at Zalkorath. 3 days ago, this council voted to send human soldiers to fight in the Velthari suppression campaign, a colonial war, a war of conquest against a species that has done nothing to Earth. You voted to send our children to die for your empire. The Council requires military contributions from all member species, Zalkorath said. This is known. Yes, Helena agreed. And on the same day, this council also rejected Earth's application for Tier 2 status. For the 19th time, in 80 years, we are good enough to die for you, but not good enough to be treated as equals. The Orlani elders shifted slightly in their chambers of light. It was the first time Helena had ever seen them move during a session. That era ends today, Helena continued. We will not send our soldiers to your war. We will not mine your asteroids. We will not test your dangerous technologies. We will not serve as your peacekeepers, your engineers, your doctors, or your servants. From this moment forward, humanity stands alone. She stepped back from the speaking platform. You may think this is a mistake. You may think we need you more than you need us. Perhaps you are right. She paused. Or perhaps you have never truly understood what humanity has been doing for you all these years. High Speaker Zalkorath rose to his full height, towering over the human ambassador. You are making a grave error, Ambassador Vance. Earth is a small world with limited resources. Without the Council's protection, you will be vulnerable. Without our technology, you will fall behind. Without our trade networks, your economy will collapse. Helena nodded slowly. Perhaps, but at least we will be free. She turned and began walking toward the exit. Her footsteps echoed in the suddenly quiet chamber. Ambassador Vance. Zalkorath's voice boomed across the hall. If you leave this chamber, there will be no coming back. The Council does not forgive such insults. Helena stopped. She did not turn around. The Council has given humanity 80 years of insults, she said. Now you will learn what it means to receive them instead of giving them. She walked out of the Grand Assembly Hall. The great doors closed behind her, with a sound like thunder. For several long moments, no one in the chamber spoke. Then the Kivrith delegation resumed their clicking laughter. Others joined in. Soon, the hall was filled with the sound of alien amusement. Only the Orilani elders remained silent. They had seen many species come and go over their long existence. They had watched civilizations rise and fall, and something about the way that small human woman had smiled made them feel something they had not felt in thousands of years. Uncertainty. But they said nothing. Like everyone else in the chamber, they assumed this was a small matter. Humanity was young and foolish. They would struggle alone for a few years, realize their mistake, and come crawling back to beg for readmission. The galaxy was vast and ancient and powerful. What could one small species possibly do to change it? They would learn the answer soon enough. Outside the chamber, Helena Vance allowed herself a single, deep breath. Then she activated her communication device and spoke to the person waiting on the other end. It's done, she said. Begin Phase 2. Far away, on a blue planet called Earth, preparations that had been 80 years in the making finally began. 3 months passed after humanity left the Galactic Council. In a civilization that measured time in centuries, 3 months was nothing. It was the blink of an eye. Most Council species barely noticed that the humans were gone. At first, everything seemed normal. The Grand Assembly continued its meetings. Trade ships moved along their ancient routes. The great machine of galactic civilization kept turning, as it had for 50,000 years. Then the problems began. Captain Yevtal of the Meridian Trade Consortium was the first to notice something was wrong. His ship, a massive cargo vessel carrying rare minerals worth more than some planets, was traveling through the Meridian Trade Corridor. This was the busiest shipping lane in the Orion arm of the galaxy. Thousands of ships passed through it every day. It had been safe for centuries. His ship was attacked by pirates within 3 hours of entering the corridor. The attack was not successful. Yevtal's crew fought back and escaped. But when he reported the incident to the consortium headquarters, he learned something disturbing. Pirate attacks in the corridor had increased by 340% in the past 3 months. Ships were being raided, crews were being killed, and cargo worth billions was being stolen. Yevtal was confused. The Meridian Trade Corridor had always been heavily patrolled. Security was supposed to be the best in the galaxy. Then he checked the patrol records and found his answer. For the past 60 years, human naval vessels had been responsible for securing the corridor. It was considered a low-priority assignment by the Council. The patrol routes were long and boring. The ships were old and poorly maintained. No respectable species wanted the job. So it was given to the humans. The humans had done the job well. So well, in fact, that everyone had forgotten they were doing it. Piracy had become almost non-existent. Merchants assumed the corridor was naturally safe. They never realized that human crews were working day and night, chasing down pirates, rescuing stranded ships, and maintaining order in one of the most important trade routes in the galaxy. Now, the humans were gone. And the pirates had noticed. This was just the beginning. On the agricultural world of Kethvara Prime, the harvest was failing. The Kethari species depended on this world to feed their population of 30 billion. They had farmed here for 8,000 years. Nothing had ever gone wrong. Now their crops were dying. A strange fungus was spreading through their fields, killing everything it touched. Their scientists studied the problem for weeks but could not find a solution. The fungus seemed to adapt to every treatment they tried. Finally, a young researcher named Tevira found something in the old records. A similar fungus had appeared on Kethvara Prime 12 years ago. It had been identified and treated before it could spread. The researchers who had treated it were human. Human xenobotanists had been assigned to Kethvara Prime as part of their mandatory community service rotation. The council considered it punishment duty. The humans had to work in the fields like common laborers, studying alien plants that no one cared about. But the humans had not treated it as punishment. They had studied the ecosystem of Kethvara Prime with intense curiosity. They had identified dozens of potential threats, including the fungus that was now destroying the harvest. They had developed treatments and prevention methods. They had quietly saved the Kethari food supply without anyone noticing or thanking them. Now they were gone, and so was the knowledge they had taken with them. Tevira sent an urgent message to the council, requesting that human scientists be brought back to help. The council's response was a single line: humanity is no longer a member species. The council has no authority to compel their assistance. Kethvara Prime's crops continued to die. Similar stories emerged from across the galaxy. 17 deep space research stations went silent within the same week. These stations monitored cosmic phenomena that could threaten entire solar systems. They were supposed to have the best equipment and the most skilled crews. Investigation revealed that the stations had been neglected for decades. Their reactor cores were old and dangerous. Their life support systems were failing. The council had decided that replacing the equipment was economically inefficient. Instead, they had assigned human engineering crews to keep the stations running through constant repairs and creative solutions. The humans had done their job so well that the station's problems never appeared on any official reports. The council assumed everything was fine. They did not realize that human engineers were working around the clock, holding together aging technology with nothing but skill and determination. Now those engineers were gone. Without their constant attention, the stations began to fail one by one. High Speaker Zal Korath received a classified intelligence report in his private chambers. He read it 3 times, hoping he had misunderstood. He had not. The report detailed everything humans had been doing during their 80 years as a probationary species. It was far more than anyone had realized. Human doctors had been treating diseases in council hospitals that other species found boring or unprofitable to cure. Human teachers had been educating the children of poor colonies that the council had abandoned. Human diplomats had been mediating minor disputes between species, preventing them from growing into major conflicts. Human scientists had been maintaining research projects that the council had defunded but never officially canceled. Everywhere the council had created problems through neglect or indifference, humans had quietly stepped in to find solutions. They had done this without recognition, without reward, without even being asked. They had done it because that was simply who they were. And now they were gone. Zal Korath called an emergency session of the council's inner circle. 7 of the most powerful beings in the galaxy gathered in a private chamber to discuss a problem none of them had seen coming. "This is absurd," said the Korath representative, her mandibles clicking with annoyance. "One small species cannot be this important. Our civilization existed for thousands of years before humans joined us." "That is true," said the Meridian delegate, a being made of flowing silver liquid. "But we have become dependent on them without realizing it. They filled gaps we did not know existed. Then we will fill those gaps ourselves," the Cavereth said. "We are far more advanced than humans. Whatever they were doing, we can do better." But when they tried, they discovered an uncomfortable truth. The tasks humans had performed were not glamorous. They were boring, difficult, and often thankless. The superior species of the Council had no interest in doing such work. They had spent centuries training themselves to believe that such tasks were beneath them. Worse, many of the solutions humans had developed were built on human knowledge that the Council had never bothered to record. The humans had kept notes and records, of course, but they had taken everything with them when they left. 3 conflicts between Council species erupted into open warfare within weeks of each other. All 3 had been simmering for years. All 3 had been kept under control by human mediators working behind the scenes. Without those mediators, old hatreds and rivalries came flooding back. Zalkorath sat alone in his chambers, reading report after report of systems failing, crises growing, and problems spreading. For the first time in his 3-century life, he felt something he had never experienced before: fear. He had laughed when Helena Vance walked out of the Grand Assembly. He had called her withdrawal a tantrum. He had assumed humans were too small and too weak to matter. He had been wrong. In a quiet moment of honesty, he spoke the words that would haunt the Council for generations to come. We did not lose a member species. We lost the species that was keeping us together. We told them they were nothing, and they believed us. Now they are showing us what nothing looks like. Outside, the galaxy continued to crumble in small ways that grew larger every day, and somewhere in the darkness of space, the blue planet called Earth remained silent. It was waiting. The universe just did not know what it was waiting for. The Orilani had not hurried for 4,000 years. Their species had learned patience over millions of years of existence. They thought in centuries the way other beings thought in days. A decision that seemed urgent to others might take them decades to consider, but when they understood what humanity's departure truly meant, they moved faster than anyone had ever seen them move. An Orilani diplomatic vessel left their homeworld within a single week of their decision. It was a beautiful ship, made of crystallized light and ancient metals that had no name in any other language. It carried 3 Orilani elders, beings so old that they remembered when the Galactic Council was first formed. They came to Earth to beg, but when they reached Earth's solar system, they found something that stopped them cold. The Sol system had transformed. Where once there had been only a small blue planet and its primitive satellites, now there was a fortress. Massive defense platforms orbited every planet and moon. Weapons, systems of unknown design, pointed outward at the approaching stars. Mining stations worked the asteroid belt with efficiency that rivaled the oldest Council operations. And the ships, thousands of human warships, patrolled the boundaries of their solar system. They were not the old, outdated vessels the Council had given humanity decades ago. These were new designs, sleek and powerful, built with technology the Council's databases could not identify. The Orilani vessel was stopped at the edge of the system by a human battleship. Admiral Chen Wei appeared on their communication screens. He was an older man with gray hair and calm eyes. He wore a uniform that bore no Council symbols, no marks of the old treaties. It was something new, something purely human. "Honored elders," he said. His voice was polite but cold. "You are not expected. State your purpose." The lead elder, a being of pure golden light, spoke through their translation systems. "We come seeking dialogue with Earth's government." The Orilani wished to discuss terms for humanity's return to the Council. Admiral Chen did not smile. The Council rejected humanity's membership applications for 80 years. What has changed? The elder hesitated. In their millions of years of existence, the Orilani had rarely been asked to explain themselves. Other species simply accepted their wisdom. "We now recognize that mistakes were made," the elder said. "The Council is prepared to offer expedited consideration for Tier 2 status. We are also willing to discuss revised labor agreements that would better reflect humanity's contributions." Admiral Chen was silent for a moment. Then he transmitted a data file to the Orilani vessel. "Read this," he said. "Then leave." The file was a list. It contained names, 17 million names, every human who had died serving the Council over 80 years, every miner killed in dangerous asteroid operations, every soldier lost in wars that had nothing to do with Earth, every doctor who died treating plagues on forgotten colonies, every engineer who was killed when neglected equipment finally failed. 17 million names, each one representing a life that the Council had treated as worthless. The Orilani elders read the list in silence. It took them 3 days. When they finished, they understood that they had nothing to offer that could balance such a debt. They left without another word. Other delegations followed in the months that came. Each one found the same transformed solar system. Each one was met by Admiral Chen or another human officer. Each one offered something in exchange for humanity's return. The Cavereth offered technology. They brought samples of their most advanced scientific equipment, things that would have been considered priceless gifts just a year before. The humans examined the offerings politely, then returned them. Their own technology, it seemed, had already moved beyond what the Cavereth could provide. The Meridian Consortium offered wealth. They brought contracts worth trillions of credits, promising Earth a share of the most profitable trade routes in the galaxy. The humans listened to their presentation, asked a few questions about the fine print, then declined. They were not interested in rejoining an economic system that had exploited them for generations. The Velthari came next. They were losing their colonial war badly, now that human soldiers were no longer fighting for them. Their empire was crumbling. They offered Earth territory, vast regions of space that could support billions of human colonists. The humans considered this offer longer than the others. Then, they refused it, as well. "Keep your conquered lands," said Helena Vance, who had returned to diplomatic service. "We have no interest in building an empire on the suffering of others. That is your way, not ours." The Velthari ambassador stared at her with something like confusion. In his culture, power and territory were everything. He could not understand a species that would refuse such gifts. "What do you want?" he finally asked. "Name your price." "Everyone has a price." Helena shook her head. "You still do not understand. We do not want anything from you. We do not want to return to the Council. We do not want your technology, or your wealth, or your territory. We want to be left alone to build something better." "Something better?" The ambassador laughed bitterly. "The Council has ruled the galaxy for 50,000 years. What could humans possibly build that would be better?" Helena smiled. It was the same smile she had worn when she walked out of the Grand Assembly. "Stay alive long enough, and you might find out." Meanwhile, the galaxy continued to fall apart. Without human diplomats serving as neutral mediators, species that had been rivals for centuries no longer had anyone to keep them from fighting. Old wars that had been frozen for generations suddenly turned hot again. Border disputes became battles. Trade disagreements became economic warfare. The Council tried to appoint new mediators from their own ranks, but every candidate came from a species that had enemies and allies of its own. No one trusted them to be fair. The Kreth were too arrogant. The Meridian were too focused on profit. The Orilani were too slow and too distant. Only the humans had been neutral enough, young enough, and strange enough to be trusted by everyone. And now, they were gone. High Speaker Zal Korath watched reports of the spreading chaos from his chambers. 3 major wars were now burning across Council space. 17 species had formally complained about the breakdown of essential services. The economy was contracting for the first time in 2,000 years. His aide entered with another report. "High Speaker, we have received word from the Orilani elders. They wish to convene an emergency session to discuss the human situation." "What do they propose?" The aide hesitated. "They propose that the Council formally apologize to humanity for 80 years of mistreatment. They also propose that humans be offered immediate Tier 1 status, equal to the founding species of the Council." Zal Korath stared at his aide in shock. Tier 1 status had never been offered to any species in the entire history of the Council. It would make humans equal to the Orilani themselves. "They will never accept," he said finally. "We have nothing they want anymore. The elders believe we must try. They say that without humanity the Council will not survive another century." Zal Korath sat in silence for a long time. Outside his window, the stars burned with the same cold light they always had. But somehow, the universe felt darker than before. "Send the offer," he said at last, "and pray that they are more forgiving than we deserve." But even as he spoke, he knew in his heart that it was already too late. Humanity had spent 80 years learning exactly who the Council truly was. They had seen the arrogance, the cruelty, the casual disregard for anyone deemed lesser. They had not forgotten, and they would never go back. Sylvine was a spy. She had worked for the Meridian Intelligence Services for 40 years. She had infiltrated governments, stolen secrets, and toppled regimes. She was considered one of the best operatives in the galaxy. But this mission was different. This was not about stealing technology or gathering military intelligence. This was about understanding. The council needed to know how they had been so wrong about humanity. Sylvine traveled alone in a small ship disguised as a merchant vessel. She did not go to Earth. The human homeworld was too well defended, too carefully watched. Instead, she went to the outer colonies, small human settlements in distant systems that had existed beyond council jurisdiction. These were the places where humans had been free to be themselves, away from the council's watching eyes and constant judgment. What she found there changed everything she thought she knew. The first colony she visited was called New Helsinki. It was a cold world orbiting a dim red star. By council standards, it should have been a miserable place, barely worth colonizing. The settlers should have been struggling to survive. Instead, she found a thriving city of 2 million people. The buildings were beautiful, designed with an artistic sense that rivaled the oldest council civilizations. The streets were clean and well-maintained. The people walked with their heads held high, laughing and talking in the open air. Children played in parks filled with plants that had been carefully adapted to survive the cold climate. Sylvine posed as a researcher studying human colonial development. She asked many questions. The humans were surprisingly open in their answers. They seemed to have nothing to hide. At a local school, she observed children learning mathematics. She recognized some of the concepts they were studying. They were advanced theoretical frameworks that normally took decades for even the most gifted council scientists to master. These children were learning them in their basic schooling, treating them as simple tools rather than profound mysteries. "How do they learn so quickly?" she asked the teacher, a young woman with dark hair and kind eyes. The teacher shrugged. "We do not tell them what is too hard. We just show them problems and let them find solutions. Sometimes they surprise us with what they discover." Sylvine visited a hospital next. The medical technology she saw there was unlike anything in her databases. Diseases that still killed billions of beings across council space were treated here as minor inconveniences. The human doctors had developed cures and treatments that would have been considered impossible by the galaxy's finest medical scientists. "Where did this knowledge come from?" she asked a human physician. The doctor, an elderly man with steady hands, looked at her with gentle amusement. "We developed it ourselves. When the council gave us sick people to treat and no resources to treat them, we had to become creative. We learned to do more with less. Eventually, we learned to do things no one had done before. But the council's medical databases contain the collected knowledge of thousands of civilizations over 50,000 years." The doctor nodded. "Yes, and those databases told us what was impossible. We just forgot to read those parts." In a workshop on the edge of the city, Sylvine found engineers building engines that operated on principles her own civilization had declared physically impossible. The council's greatest scientists had proven centuries ago that faster-than-light travel had absolute limits. These human engineers were casually breaking those limits as if they had never existed. "The equations say this should not work," Sylvine said, staring at their designs. The chief engineer, a woman with grease-stained hands and a brilliant smile, laughed. "The equations were written by people who assumed they already knew the answer. We started with the question instead." Sylvine traveled to other colonies. She found the same story everywhere. Human artists were creating works that stirred emotions in beings who had thought themselves beyond such things. Human philosophers were asking questions that the oldest species had stopped asking long ago. Human scientists were making discoveries that rewrote the fundamental rules of reality, and none of this had appeared in any council database. At her last stop, a small colony called Haven, Sylvine finally asked the question that had been burning in her mind since she began this journey. She was speaking with an old woman who served as the colony's historian. The woman's name was Margaret Chen, and she had lived long enough to remember when Earth first joined the council. "Why did you hide all of this?" Sylvine asked. "Your technology, your knowledge, your capabilities. The council spent 80 years believing you were primitive. Why did you let them believe that?" Margaret laughed softly. It was a warm sound, without any bitterness or anger. "We did not hide anything," she said. "We simply did not announce it. There is a difference. I do not understand." Margaret poured 2 cups of tea and handed one to Sylvine. The spy had never tasted tea before. It was warm and slightly bitter, but somehow comforting. "When we first met the council, we were young and eager," Margaret explained. "We wanted to share everything. We wanted to learn everything. We thought we had found friends among the stars. What happened? The council happened. They saw how eager we were, and they decided we were weak. They saw our curiosity, and they called it ignorance. They saw our kindness, and they called it stupidity. They assigned us to serve them, and they never once asked what we might have to offer in return. Margaret sipped her tea. So we stopped offering. We did the jobs they gave us. We solved the problems they ignored. We learned everything we could from their technology and their culture and their history, but we kept our own discoveries to ourselves. You were preparing, Sylvine said slowly. All along, you were preparing for this day. We were preparing for the day when we would have to stand alone, Margaret corrected. We hoped it would never come. We hoped the council would eventually see us as equals, but we knew that hope alone was not enough. So we prepared. The council never noticed. Our greatest intelligence services monitored humanity for 80 years. They saw nothing. Margaret smiled. The council never asked. They were so busy telling us what we could not do that they never noticed what we were doing. They assumed we were spending all our time serving them. They never imagined we might have lives and dreams and ambitions of our own. Sylvine sat in silence for a long moment. She thought about all the reports she had read over the years, all the assessments of human capabilities, all the confident conclusions that humanity was a minor species with limited potential. All of it had been wrong. What will humanity do now? She finally asked. Margaret looked out the window at the stars beyond. We will build something new. Not an empire, not a council. Something better. Something built on respect and equality and partnership, and we will invite anyone who shares those values to join us. And the council? Margaret's expression grew sad. The council will have to live with the consequences of its choices. We will not seek revenge. We will not start wars. But we will also not forget what was done to us. And we will never go back. Sylvine returned to council space a changed being. Her report was short and devastating. We did not fail to see what humanity was, she wrote. We failed to look. We assumed we already knew the answer. So we never asked the question. For 80 years, humanity was students pretending to be servants. They learned everything about us, our weaknesses, our blind spots, our dependencies, and they revealed nothing about themselves. She paused before writing her final conclusion. Their class is over now, and we are the ones who failed the test. 1 year had passed since Ambassador Helena Vance walked out of the Grand Assembly. The galaxy had changed more in that single year than it had in the previous 1,000. The Galactic Council still existed, but it was a shadow of what it had been. The great alliance of 400 species had fractured into 3 competing factions. Each faction blamed the others for humanity's departure. Each faction claimed it would have treated humans fairly if only the others had not interfered. Old grudges that had been buried for centuries came roaring back to life. 2 major wars raged across council space. Trade routes that had been stable for generations were now dangerous. Species that had once cooperated reluctantly now openly competed for resources. The economy continued to shrink. Every month brought news of another crisis, another failure, another system falling apart. And through it all, Earth remained silent. But Earth had not been idle. The first ship to approach humanity's borders after the severing was not from the Council. It was a small vessel from the Vethkai, a minor species that most Council members could not even name. The Vethkai had been members of the Council for 300 years. In all that time, they had been treated almost exactly the way humans had been treated. Low status, dangerous assignments, broken promises. Their ambassador, a small being with silver fur and large dark eyes, requested permission to enter Earth's solar system. The request was granted. Ambassador Velcor stood before the human parliament on Earth's orbital station. He was nervous. His species had never negotiated anything important before. The Council had never given them the chance. We do not come to ask you to return to the Council, he said. His voice trembled slightly. We come to ask if you would accept us as partners. The human legislators listened quietly. Helena Vance, now serving as Secretary General of Earth's new government, leaned forward in her chair. What kind of partnership do you propose? She asked. Velcor spread his small hands. Equal partnership, mutual defense, shared technology, fair trade. We do not want to serve you. We do not want you to serve us. We want to stand beside you, as equals. The chamber was silent for a moment. Then Helena smiled. Ambassador Velcor, that is exactly what we have been waiting to hear. The treaty between Earth and the Vethkai was signed within a month. It was simple, fair, and completely unlike anything the Council had ever created. Both species contributed what they could, both species benefited equally. Neither was considered superior to the other. Word of this treaty spread across the galaxy. Other minor species watched with great interest. They had seen how the Council treated those it considered lesser. They recognized their own experiences in humanity's story. Within 6 months, 47 species had joined what came to be known as the Terran Compact. They were not the powerful species of the galaxy. They were the forgotten ones, the exploited ones. The ones who had spent centuries doing the Council's work without recognition or respect. Some were good at farming. Some were skilled engineers. Some had ancient knowledge that the Council had never bothered to record. Each brought something valuable. Each was welcomed as an equal. The Compact's founding principles were carved into stone in the main hall of Earth's orbital parliament. They were simple words, but they meant everything. No species is lesser. Every voice matters. We rise together or we fall alone. High Speaker Zalkorath watched the growth of the Terran Compact with growing horror. Every month, another species left the Council to join humanity's alliance. Every month, the balance of power shifted further away from the old order. His analysts brought him projections that made his blood run cold. At current rates, the Terran Compact would surpass the Council in economic power within 15 years. Military power within 10. In a single generation, humanity would lead the most powerful alliance in the galaxy. How is this possible? He demanded. They were nothing. They were servants. How can they build something greater than what we built in 50,000 years? His chief advisor, an ancient being who had served 3 high speakers before Zalkorath, spoke quietly. They are not building something greater. High Speaker, they are building something different. The Council was built on power and hierarchy. The strong ruled the weak. That system works, but it creates resentment. It creates enemies. And humanity? Humanity is building on partnership and equality. They treat every species as valuable. They listen to every voice. They share their knowledge freely. Species join them not because they are forced to, but because they want to. Zalkorath slammed his fist against his desk. That is naive. That is foolish. The galaxy does not work that way. The advisor shrugged. Perhaps, but it seems to be working for them. 1 year to the day after her departure from the Council, Helena Vance addressed the galaxy from Earth's orbital parliament. Behind her stood representatives of 47 species, all wearing the simple emblem of the Terran Compact, a single planet, surrounded by stars. Every major news service in the galaxy broadcast her words. Billions of beings on thousands of worlds watched and listened. 1 year ago, humanity left the Galactic Council, Helena began. We left because we were tired of being treated as less than what we are. We left because we refused to send our children to die in wars that were not ours. We left because we believed we could build something better. She paused and looked around the chamber at the many different species standing together. Today, I am proud to say that we were right. The Terran Compact is not perfect. We are still learning. We still make mistakes. But we have proven that a different way is possible. A way based on respect, on equality, on genuine partnership. Her expression grew serious. To the Galactic Council, I say this. We are not your enemies. We do not seek revenge for what was done to us. We will not start wars or conquer territory or treat others the way we were treated. That is not who we are. But we will also not forget. The Council had 80 years to see us as partners. They chose to see us as tools. That choice had consequences. Those consequences are now unfolding across the galaxy, and there is nothing we can do to stop them. The Council created its own problems. The Council must solve them. She stepped back from the podium and spread her arms to include all the species standing with her. Any species that wishes to join us as equals is welcome. The door is open, but we will not lower our standards. We will not compromise our principles. We would rather remain small and true than become large and corrupt. Her final words would be remembered for generations. The Council taught humanity a valuable lesson. They showed us exactly what kind of civilization we did not want to build. For that education, we thank them. We took everything they taught us about cruelty and arrogance and exploitation, and we built the opposite. The stars do not belong to the powerful. They belong to those who are willing to share them. We are willing. Is the galaxy. The broadcast ended. Across the cosmos, beings of 100 species discussed what they had heard. Some laughed and called it idealistic nonsense. Some trembled at what humanity had become. Some began quietly planning how to leave the council and join the compact. In his private chambers, High Speaker Zal-Korath sat alone in the darkness. He thought about the small human woman who had smiled at him 1 year ago. He thought about how he had laughed at her. He thought about everything his people had done to humanity over 80 years. They were never our servants, he whispered to the empty room. They were our salvation, and we were too blind to see it. Far away, on a blue planet called Earth, humanity looked up at the stars they had once dreamed of reaching. They had reached them. They had been rejected by them, and now they were reshaping them. The universe had panicked when Earth severed ties with the Council. It had panicked because it finally understood the truth. Humanity had never needed the galaxy. The galaxy had needed humanity all along. And now, on humanity's terms and no one else's, the stars were finally beginning to understand what that meant.